Everybody sing that shit.
Gareth Southgate, by the men who know him best. Perched outside the cattle truck that doubles up as a dressing room, 13-year-old Gareth Southgate cannot stop smiling as he savors his first international football experience. Hazelwick Comprehensive School from Crawley are on tour to the French village of Vernouillet, and with no changing room in sight, a local farmer provides an alternative for boys to put on shirts and shorts for a match against nearby Nicolas Robert College. Five-star luxury it ain't, but for the youngest member of Hazelwick's team, it is an adventure as exciting as the one he faces this summer, taking England to the World Cup finals in Russia. Gareth was the one everyone noticed and talked about. He was likable, admired and considered in what he said, even as a young boy, recalls David Palmer, the teacher in charge of the England manager's inaugural overseas trip. We had to borrow kit and there were no changing rooms, but he took everything on board, saw the funny side. He stood out both for his talent and the way he was off the pitch. He was an ambassador who got his first lesson in international relations when we were welcomed by the local mayor, who gave a very nice speech. Southgate grew up in Crawley from the age of 8. Before then, his family, parents Clive and Barbara, sister Michelle, moved around due to his father's job as a facilities manager at IBM. His first lesson in the rough and tumble of football came aged 3 when he chased a ball at home, ran into a glass door and cut his head open. From Clive, Southgate inherited stoicism, he never heard swearing at home, and sporting talent. Dad was an athletics coach and ran his son's first Sunday league team, Crawley Traders, who held training sessions in a multi-story car park because it was well lit in winter. Gareth did a lot of athletics, says Palmer, who taught at the school for 38 years. He was county champion at triple jump and held the Hazelwick record for years. He was also one of the best 200-meter sprinters in the district. He played basketball and rugby too. He was a fly half, which gives a clue to his football talent. Southgate's head of was Steve Every, now academy director at Charlton Athletic. I love to tell our boys about Gareth. That he was this well-spoken, polite young man who didn't appear to have a steely determination off the field, but was a hell of a competitor on it. At 14, Southgate missed a lot of football due to a condition called Osgood-Schlatter disease, which causes knee pain in growing adolescents. Yet, 2 years later, Crystal Palace offered him an apprenticeship. He was bright enough to do A-levels if he'd stayed on, stressed Palmer. But he was pretty focused on what he wanted to do. Nobody at school tried to talk him out of following his dream. Crystal Palace's dressing room was full of characters, says Jeff Thomas, captain of their 1990 FA Cup final side. Ian Wright was bouncing off the walls, Andy Gray and I competed for everything. It wasn't a case of initiation but survival. Joining the streetwise band of brothers in the first team was Southgate's aspiration, but getting through the youth team and reserves was just as hard. Alan Smith, then youth team manager, says, the young players cleaned boots in cold water and usually had to shower in cold water after the boiler had been used up. Our training ground at Mitcham was a pretty dirty place. 1 toilet between 40 blokes. For away games, we'd cram 14 players and the kit into one minivan. The banter could be harsh. For the well-mannered Southgate, it was a culture shock. A big turning point came at 16 when Smith felt he needed to dish out the mother of all rollickings, ending with the clear message, you have to toughen up. Otherwise, no chance. It was left to senior pro Gary O'Reilly, who used to drop Gareth home after training, to pick up the pieces. Alan was very forthright and Gareth was upset. I don't think anyone had spoken to him like that in his life, says O'Reilly, who now lives and works in New York. He was being tested and asked to prove that he had what it takes to make it. Despite the harsh words, Smith and Southgate remain close friends to this day. After 100 reserve team games, a breakthrough came in 1990 when Southgate and best pal Andy Woodman were named in Steve Coppell's FA Cup final squad to face Manchester United, though there were ulterior motives behind the decision. Gareth and Woody were our Gophers, smiles Thomas. We had a players' pool and they were the go-betweens with agent Eric Hall. He had Gareth hopping about doing all sorts. If we needed an umbrella or the right newspaper for a photo shoot, his job was to get it. As consolation, Southgate was allowed to join the traditional pre-match walkabout at Wembley. He learned how to survive in an environment akin to Wimbledon's crazy gang. He'd do it in a different way from everyone else. He used his humor, sharp enough to bat anyone back who gave him stick, adds Thomas. I remember all the players going to a nightclub called Bananas and I got involved in a fracas. I was splashed all over the papers while Gareth stayed out of it. He was much more sensible. We knew on the pitch if you ever needed him, he'd be there for you. But off it, he was a thinker, not a fighter. Coppell's team broke up, Thomas left after relegation in 1993 and Smith became manager and made 22-year-old Southgate his captain. 2 years later, Southgate's own career would outgrow Selhurst Park. But what he learned would stay with him. Crystal Palace was a bear pit really, he says. But that doesn't mean you can't say hello to the tea lady. Good management is taking the best bits from people you have worked with, and discarding the worst. One ceremony carried out by his Aston Villa boss John Gregory will definitely not be repeated by Southgate in Russia. John would join in our warm-ups before matches wearing the captain's armband. Then back in the dressing room he'd place it on Gareth's arm in front of the other lads, reveals Villa teammate Steve Watson. I don't think we'll be seeing the same kind of thing between Gareth and Harry Kane. The year of 1996 was pivotal for Southgate. He got engaged to Alison, won his first major